Welcome to PRS in Conversation. I'm James Bubar. If you're new to the PRS YouTube channel, or if you haven't done so yet, please remember to subscribe. You can subscribe below. You can also click the bell to get notifications. And please visit prs.org, where you can get up-to-date information on the events, the courses that are starting. Recently, Dr. Sawyer has been doing live discussion events that you can join. And they've expanded the bookstore even to include used books right now. And of course, you can make a donation. We do appreciate your support, whatever you can do. And thank you very much for tuning in to PRS Conversation this week, where I'm really excited. I feel like a kid in Christmas, actually. I feel really lucky to be joined by Dr. Raïna Manuel-Paris, who is a very popular professor, lecturer, teacher, workshop leader at PRS. And she actually has a playlist on our YouTube channel, which we encourage people to visit. Especially, there's a group of her lectures that she has done at PRS, and it's well worth your time. And Dr. Raïna Manuel-Paris was born in Paris, France, lived in England, and then moved to the United States in her early 20s. Her love of transformational storytelling has taken her from an MFA in film from Columbia University to a Ph.D. in mythological studies and depth psychology. She is a published writer of nonfiction, poetry, and several scholarly articles, as well as a documentary filmmaker. Her understanding of what gives meaning to daily life has led her to her work with dreams and to include meditation practice in her classrooms. She also speaks on several subjects, including love, primal agent of change, war, trauma, and spiritual transformation, and the Major Arcanas of the Tarot as a sacred life path, and the Cradle and the Crown is her passion. And I'm hoping we can get into, well, that's a lot right there. That's a, that's a lot of conversation right there, Raïna. So I'm sure we'll get into some of that. The Cradle and Crown is a unique process that she has developed over time. With it, she helps people recover their natural innate joy and claim a felt sense of inner authority. She has also been learning the frame drum, the ancient drum of priestesses, and natural horsemanship with great teacher and trainer Chris Sobenes. I hope I pronounced the name okay. And I know we'll be talking about the connection, the spiritual and love connection with the animals and horses in this conversation. And also interesting to me is Dr. Raïna Manuel-Paris has been teaching tarot and giving readings for over 15 years. And maybe we'll get into this as well, but her work on the tarot very much aligns to alchemical symbolism and understanding. And that's really interesting to me. I know we both spent time in our youth in Europe, so we're haunted by those castle spaces and those cathedral spaces and the Gothic and all that wonderful symbolism that kind of appears in the illuminated manuscripts. So in any case, thank you again so much for taking some time to join us from the other side of the world. I'm currently in Izmir, and it's late evening, and I think you may appreciate this story that Alexander the Great is one of the people who came through ancient Smyrna. And I lived not too far from the hill where supposedly Alexander the Great fell asleep and had a dream. And in his dream, the god came to him and said, move the city. So he moved Old Smyrna further into the bay, which is now New Smyrna, and that's where we are today. So this part of Izmir has been occupied constantly since Alexander the Great moved it a little further in the bay. But I bring up that story because you would appreciate it, I think, like no one else, when I mentioned that if Alexander was here, then we know that Bucephalus was here, his famed horse. And that famed relationship that is taken mythical proportions on itself. So I thought I would bring that up, and maybe that I think Bucephalus lived till his late 20s and had a very famous funerary ceremony when he finally passed somewhere in, I think he was near India. But uh, anyways, thank you again so much for joining us. I know at this time we need. It seems like the introduction when I read about your work, the words trauma and love and story, they seem so prevalent now because of what we're all going through. So thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for this introduction, and I'm thrilled to be able to speak with you across time and space.
Yes, yeah, I am a
Yeah.
little. I am a little. I may phase into some nostalgia, knowing that you're in Ojai right now. So if I drift off, it's because I'm remembering so many great trips to that. It's really almost sacred land there, and such a great esoteric and seeking tradition that you're now, becoming infused with. So it'll be interesting to see here how the place is affecting your work and your kind of actions
Oh,
right now.
absolutely. Well, it's definitely affected me because I have, as I was mentioning earlier, I now have a dog and a horse,
Yes,
which I didn't used to have when I lived back in Los Angeles.
yes,
But you mentioned, love, trauma, and transformation. Well, I think you were using another word. You said love, trauma, and
yeah.
we're talking about
Story,
story.
exactly. Story, which is
So, yeah,
a a great element of transformation. So yeah,
story is definitely transformation, and we certainly live in liminal times.
yeah,
As I talk about, it's another one of my lectures about the in between. But
yeah.
I think all of modern society is in a constant state of liminality anyway,
Hmm.
and that we've been thrust into a more um, obvious version of it, a
Yeah,
more intense version of it, so we
yeah,
can't avoid looking at it anymore. It's
yeah,
like, I mean, we've been living with, the shadow of the unconscious being illuminated
yeah,
front and center for a few years now in this country, especially in America.
yeah,
And, uh, and so story, trauma, and love are like, that's what it's about. It's the stuff of transformation, and it's also about the stuff of liminality, which we're so, the whole world is in. But I think it's really um, an aspect of modernity,
hmm,
of the modern society. It's a
yeah,
constant state of change. It's a constant state of not knowing where we are going
hmm,
and
yeah,
losing sight of where we've been. So there's like where do you find your center? Where do you find
right,
your ground?
yeah,
And that's where story comes in.
yeah,
Because it helps us find our true ground. And the ground is not just physical, although there are places seem to be more infused with a sense of history and spirituality than other
yeah,
places. I think where you are in Izmir, as Greg did, the city of uh, Homer's
hmm,
birth.
yeah,
Um, and Ojai is also sacred native land, and
yeah,
but we have to carry that inside.
yes,
And how do you do that? And that's
yes,
that's a lot of what my work tends to be about. It's really recovering that sense of intuitive connection with life and with the world around us from a place of inner understanding, as opposed to kind of trying to hook yourself into the external when
yes.
it moves around so much,
Hmm. Yeah, that was really
and so
interesting. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I mean, that's why dream time is so important to
Yeah,
me, like doing this dream work, because it can inform your day-to-day life in a really beautiful way if you take the time to really look at it and study it, because those are the stories of your soul.
yeah,
The dreams are stories of your soul, but they're like the stories that are really help you heal, if you look at them
Yeah.
that way. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. There's a lot of references now to strange dreams during COVID time. People are
Yeah.
dreaming more. They're dreaming strange things. It's fascinating, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But uh, you mentioned about places that have been made sacred by generations or epochs even of story. And so, before we get too far into further along into your work, I hope you'll indulge me. I miss PRS a lot, and I know everybody does. Even like the people who are living down the street miss PRS right now. So I like to start with this kind of the ritual story of your origin with PRS, your connection. I mean, you've been such a powerful force, very popular in a lot of ways, from workshops to lectures, and so I'm just curious how you in your journey, how you came about it and started this path uh, with contributing and helping to shape the PRS story.
Ah. Um, well, I had been to PRS before Greg took over as president,
Mm-hmm.
with another colleague and who had been also a mentor and a teacher, Dr. Lionel Corbett,
Mm-hmm.
who wrote the religious function of the psyche.
Yeah.
And he was giving a talk there, and I went with a friend so we could hear him. And so that was my first encounter with PRS, through a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up teaching at the time it was called the Relativity or Studio School at the time. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
a different name now. And with also another colleague and a friend of mine from the Pacifica Graduate Institute, where I got my Ph.D. in mythology, Will Lin.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I ended up reconnecting with Greg. But what I love is the day I met with Greg. Um, we had our first kind of interview, if you will, our first
Right.
connection. It was on my birthday. It was January 9th, and it was absolutely pouring rain. And I didn't know I had never met Greg,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes I have experiences in my daytime life that have the aura of a dream. Sometimes there are things that happen in daily life that really have that powerful um, sense of the dream time about
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
They have a certain shine and aura, and there's something mysterious going on there. And I got into my car, and then generally, I don't really like driving in the pouring rain. It's not my favorite thing to
Yeah.
do, and it was my birthday. And it was my first time driving there, and I felt this incredible energy kind of surround my whole car, and I felt this kind of natural kind of joy take over, this beautiful
Wow.
energy, just like, and I was just filled with joy driving there, and I
Wow.
hadn't been there in years, and I was going to meet Greg, and I was absolutely certain by the time I got there that this was the right place for me before I had even met Greg.
Wow.
So there was something driving with me on the
Yeah.
way to PRS, and of course, I got there and we were in his office, and there was this, I don't know, this effortless, instant connection, like recognition, like
Yeah. Yeah.
we are at the same kind of wavelength or something, and
Yeah.
it was just completely effortless. And I've never had like an interview with anyone, like it was completely different than any other situation where you're supposed to go to an interview to meet,
Right.
the president of a university or something. It was just completely effortless and beautiful. you know, but I was driven there with that joy, that energy of joy was already kind of preceding me, you know, paving the way. So
Yeah.
it was just beautiful. And he had some, you know, some of the people who work there or were studying
Hmm.
there came in, and that was it. That was my, you know, and from then on, I just felt incredibly at home uh, every time I came to PRS to teach or do a lecture. And there's something about, you know, well, Dr. Sawyer, Greg Sawyer, the president. Um, yeah, I'm feeling, you know, maybe I should kind of honor him and give him his former title. But, um, that's just really, he has something in him that sees through any kind of persona or falsehood.
Mm.
Like he's there's something about him that's very real, and he can see in another person their truth, their reality.
Mm.
And I don't know a lot of people like that. You know, there's always I always he's completely of one piece. He's completely himself,
Mm.
and it's absolutely wonderful to work with someone
Yes.
like, you know, that's not. And plus, he's incredibly brilliant and smart, which is refreshing and nice too, you know. And he does really see who the other person is, like
Mm.
behind whatever the persona can be.
Mm.
He has a real intuitive intelligence as well,
Mm.
which is also not that common.
Mm-hmm.
And it just made it such a delight, and I felt so welcome. And it was like, this is a place where I want to be, where I want to work, you know,
Yeah.
with that of caliber of human being,
Yeah.
because there aren't that many like that around.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no string, there is no, it's just who he is. And I just really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah, and I really miss that being far away. But it's incredible how many times the word home comes up when I talk about these origin stories. I think the two
Yeah.
biggest themes are recognition, which is that similar to that, you know, I am that, or you art that, you know, saying, and how many times home comes up, even though people had never heard of PRS and just kind of just go there. But it certainly sounds like an incredible experience if driving in the heavy rain in the California LA traffic was a joyous experience. So you were definitely somewhere else, as you could say. Um, and for me, we actually met before, although you probably may not remember because it was after your wonderful talk, Love and Sacred Medicine, which I've really
Mhm.
encouraged people to watch or rewatch. Very very profound. You know, it's more than profound. It's an amazing offering, especially now. Really, I needed to hear it, um, and it really speaks to people at this time. So I really encourage people to listen to it. But I had flown from Izmir that day. You know, one of these weird flights where you leave on Thursday and you arrive on Thursday, even though it takes 22 hours or whatever. And I went from I got my rented a car in LA at LAX and drove right to PRS. And I walked in and I remember seeing you finishing your talk. I think you were on the last question, and there was the beautiful image of a dog behind you on the presentation. Maybe a puppy, but definitely had puppy energy. And it was the final question. Maybe even I think Greg was saying, last question, and uh, and so that was Valentine's Day, and I was, missing my
Yeah.
fiance, of course, but I was back. Great to be home, but it was so wonderful to be back and meet you. And I think it's kind of exciting that now we're speaking again at another very interesting time where we're getting near the thinning of the veils. You know, the thinning of the veil,
Yes.
the world's moving toward this Halloween season where the veil is thinnest between the worlds, as they say. So I think that's a nice. That's nice that we could come together at this time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I thought if you don't mind, we could talk a little bit about. I don't want you to have to deliver the lecture again, but I thought it would be. I'd be interested in talking to you about it, considering where we are now in as a kind of not just with the pandemic, but with this modern or even hyper modern situation we have going on with disconnection and distraction abounding. Now you're in Ojai, so maybe even you're reflecting on that talk. And so maybe I could talk to you about how you think about certain themes that you talk to, if that's okay. Would you mind?
Uh, you mean from the that particular lecture? Is that what
Yeah.
you're
Well, like
asking?
for example, I was wondering about one of the things that you talk about in that lecture is when you is it struck me very very Campbellian in terms of the hero's journey, where the return was Campbell talks about the return is the hardest part.
It is.
You and I was really struck where you were saying that you had this profound experience, and I don't want to feel like I'm giving away giving away the ending, but you had this profound, that as an understatement, spiritual experience with guides and and wisdom and yourself. And you had talked about how this kind of return, you were expecting to encounter love, but you encountered fear. And so I was just really interesting now looking back, not only on the talk, but all this time since the journey you took, is I'm interested in how you have returned, and do you still feel you can connect to that experience you have? Do you feel it fading like a dream, and does it come back? So I guess a, a an epilogue, so to speak, on how you think about the
Yeah.
return based on that
Yeah.
experience you had.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think there's a big difference between having a spiritual experience,
Mm-hmm.
however powerful it is, because the experience of the transformation of the psyche in the way that I experienced it when I went to Lake Atitlan, um, it can last, quite a long time when it's that big. But still, it's different. It's different from having like a spiritual transformation.
Mm-hmm.
There's you can have many experiences that are profound and spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
but in and of themselves they can be very limited, in time and scope, and partly because we don't live in a world that nurtures and protects those experiences.
Right.
You go back into a world that's like, tears you apart as opposed
Yeah.
to helps you stay together, because it's such, a complete reversal of that sense of that holy sense of oneness and vulnerability of the heart at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, which happens in that kind of experience where you're broken open in a way so you can
Mm-hmm.
receive, the power and beauty of love that
Mm-hmm.
is the true healer, right? So, how that's why it's so difficult to maintain, like, or people who go on meditation retreats and feel so, zen and wonderful, and
Mm-hmm.
they come back and then 2 weeks later it's all gone,
Yeah.
because they've had to deal with, I don't know, a gas leak, or,
Right.
work and the in-laws, or God knows what else that happens, or the current administration and blah blah
Right.
blah, all of that. The the world of our daily society, which makes it very hard to hang on to yourself. So a lot of the other work that I've developed and I'm doing is about how do you hang on
Mm-hmm.
to that, with the big S. How do you hang on to that connection with the deep psyche? How do you hang on to that vulnerability of the heart that helps you
Yeah.
be open and connected to others? That's the work. That's the hard work,
Yeah.
as the return of the hero, as Joseph Campbell, you were mentioning. So, and I think it's different for every single person.
Mm.
So I think it's a very personal process. But there are also other things that can help nurture that. And a lot of the courses that I've developed, whether it's Cradle and The Crown or the course I've been teaching right now online at PRS, which is awakening the magician within, uh, dealing with the magician as the archetypal image, and with the four elements and all that. So those are things and ways that can support you basically hanging on to your true self, to that beauty, to that love. And for me, I think probably environment and the creating a sacred space for myself in the physical world, having ritual on a daily basis, tending to my dreams on a daily basis, being with animals and in the natural world on a daily basis. All of those things help, keep you sane, basically, and keep you connected to whatever that, experience of transformation you may have had, because I know many people have spiritual experiences, but a way to nurture that experience is how you live your life on a daily basis, and what time you make for sitting in that sacredness, sitting in meditation, or sitting in with nature, with a tree or with a horse. Like those things are all contribute to reminding you of that natural connection with the mystery, which is where we want to live, which is where the joy is, right? Because that's where the heart can sing. It's like that call and response with the the beauty and the mystery of life. That's where we feel most whole and alive. It's in that space.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to you what I'm saying, right?
It's beautiful, and it's encountering beauty, and so maybe that's maybe it's one of the things I thought about when I was listening to your talk for definitely for the second time was the relationship between, I think, story and love, of course, but particularly language and love. And when you're and language as a ritual in telling or hearing these stories, because it struck me. I mean, you're a beautiful writer, but it also struck me how awkward it is to use some of those words. Maybe it's culturally, maybe it's personally. We don't think. I don't know, we're that gifted as writers, or maybe it sounds cliche because it's been hollowed out by culture. But I'm just really was struck by the relationship between in your kind of talk about the journey, some of the things you're saying now, and the language you're using to try to connect with that. That really struck me in your talk, and making space along with meditation and ritual, but being very aware of the language that they're conjuring. It can be words can conjure, and so I'm just curious about how if one came first, if they kind of came together. Are you more aware of the connection of language as ritual in creating a kind of space for the encounter? It's just interesting because you've worked in so many media, you know.
Yeah. Well, I like to listen. Yeah, that's why I also love poetry.
Yeah.
Because you really have to listen for the image
Mm-hmm.
and the sound. Um, I try to listen. Um, in That's how you come into relationship with the world. It's like how I try to listen from a really Martin Buber talks about the difference between an I-it relationship with life and then an I-thou, right? So I really try to work hard to be in an I-thou relationship with life, right? So that I don't objectify what is around me, whether it's another human being or a four-legged or, you know, a tree or whatever it is, you know. So when you put yourself in that understanding that it's you're more of a subject to subject relationship, so you don't put yourself at the center with a circle of things around you. You
Right.
put yourself as part of the circle. Yeah, you're
Mm-hmm.
just one in the circle of life, as opposed to being in the center. And so, in terms of language, then what I try to do is to listen. Like, I wrote a song which is actually part of the first novel that I wrote, and the song came as a result of meditating on what is it truly that the cloud says to the mountain. What does the cloud say to the mountain? And really listening for that. And allowing yourself to be surprised. You know, when the cloud comes around the mountain, decides to sit around it and crown it with its white glory, then what is it? What's that relationship about? What is it like? You know, or brings it rain or whatever it is, or snow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing. And then you get into this incredible, like you realize that how incredibly alive everything is, right? And so the sacred nature of things comes naturally out of listening to the language of things that are not you.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I couldn't help but think, earlier you were talking about the difficulty of the return, and I don't remember where I encountered it. It may be a Buddhist saying, but they talk about that the mountain is not the difficult part, it's the pebble in your shoe. You know,
Right.
so it's that returning to the daily life, and
Yeah.
another great theme from your talk that I want to get into a little more when we talk about the strange situation we're in now, but is that it's that these losses can be gifts. You say life is ever abundant in these blessings, which can be things like loss. And I think I do want to get to that. But before we do it, I'm curious about how that how that how when you don't have the loss, like just returning to the daily life, seems to be the biggest challenge, right? When you come
Yeah.
back from this encounter and you do have a stable job or a marriage or projects, and there's something about the daily prosaicness that also can be tough to hold on to these peak spiritual encounters.
Yeah. I think for me, the hardest part when I came back was at first I was so open.
Yeah.
I was like overwhelmed by everyone else's pain. Like I felt like everybody had heart hunger and heart pain.
Wow.
And that was like I had the experience like I was talking about Greg like being really able to see through persona, and I was like I feel like everybody was vibrating with this, heart hunger and heart pain, and it was like completely overwhelming for me.
Mm. Mm.
And I didn't know how to actually deal with it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure it came from like that disconnection with, you know, from where I'd come, and then seeing everybody else's disconnection from where they are and who they are. But that's why I ended up with a 1,200-pound animal. And I needed that bigness, 1,200-pound horse in
Mm-hmm.
my case.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I needed that kind of power and groundedness to help me ground myself, you know, and get like, oh, okay, I can just be with that energy, and
Mm-hmm.
that, it's big enough to hold all the feelings that I have right now. So yeah, sometimes, you have to get like very tangible with things. And at least in my case, it's like because I couldn't even sit in meditation when I came back. I
Really?
couldn't. I was like felt constantly assaulted by like the society and the world,
Yeah.
like vibrating at a completely different
Yeah.
rate than I was,
Yeah.
coming back from Lake Atitlan. So I mean, what can I do, or where can I find something that connects with who I am and where I am, as opposed to feeling assaulted by all of this, and I was literally like led to the horse.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. You have that great quote where you say, I think you say, horses are dreams made real. I think that's the quote
Uh,
from your talk, or horses are
uh,
dreams you can touch.
are like dreams that you can touch.
Yeah, yeah, dreams that you can touch. And getting back to language, it's more profound as we think about the way you were describing dreams, where you so much encounter messages or reflections of a deeper true self, so to, for lack of a better
Yeah.
word. And so, could you talk a little bit more about that, especially for people who may not have had a horse? But I think it applies to. There's certainly something very specific about the ancient connection between horses. We were talking about Bucephalus and Alexander, right? There's the Pegasus. I'm in the land of ancient Asia Minor, right? So the land of Pegasus. But even so, I think it's probably a relationship you can have with a lot of animals. So it would just be great to hear a little bit more about how you've thought about or wrote about this relationship, and a little bit more with this dream that you can touch.
Yeah. Um, well, because it's there is no there is no trickery of the mind, right, with the animal,
Mm,
right? Because our minds are such tricksters. We can fool ourselves so easily and believe our own lies, and get stuck in, you know, old kinds of old stories that keep those lies alive. So um, when you're with horse, you are in the present moment. You're now, right? Because if you're not now with a horse, you're going to be in trouble,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
If you're not present with the horse will say, "Oh, okay, so I'm in charge. I'm going to do whatever I want," right? Or I'm going to get rid of that person that's not paying attention to me, or just going to do whatever I want. So the gift of the horse is the gift of present in now, which takes you out of the trickster mind and
Ah,
puts it's a heart to heart connection
yeah.
immediately, because horses are pure feeling presence, right?
Mm,
So you can't pretend with a horse. There's no
yeah,
pretending.
yeah.
It's immediately aware of your feeling tone and reflects that back to you as well.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like being in a dream, in dream time, right? Because in dream time, there is no past and future. It
Yeah.
is now.
Yeah.
And there is no pretending or trying to trick your own, yourself with your mind. It is happening. It is unfolding in this moment, and there you are, right? It's presence, pure presence. So that's part of the gift of the animal, is that it puts you in that presence in now, in the same way that you are in the dream time.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, the vivid now. The vivid now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, had you had experiences with horses before? Like, did you write as a young person, or was this a complete
Uh,
new journey, a new calling that you encountered at this time as you were
well,
returning?
it both. The answer to that is
Uh,
both. It was a
Good answer.
completely new. Yeah. It was a completely new journey in terms of what it was really about,
Hmm.
and because I came through it with this natural horsemanship. Um, and as a child, I had been exposed to horses, but in a completely different way, where the horse was not recognized as this holder of consciousness,
Right.
right?
Right. As a
It was
the horse was an it and not a thou, I guess.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, but as a child, I knew that there
Right.
was much more to it than that. I
Yeah.
had that awareness, but
Yeah.
I didn't have the words for it, and I didn't know how to approach it. So, it was a completely new experience in that sense for me. And I find it very important to balance, because if you do scholarly work, you can just really be in the mind, in the intellect
Yeah.
a lot, and forget the lived experience, the physical lived experience. And so spiritual transformation can happen through the lived experience in daily life as well,
Mm.
if you're open to it. And so being in relationship to nature, to animals, is really helpful that way.
Yeah, and I was reading about your meditation as you lead meditation classes. You're often focusing on things, the relationship, I should say, not the thing, but the relationship. And I was thinking that Thich Nhat Hanh is an amazing influence of mine, and I recently read one of his books called How to Walk. And we're always thinking, I don't have time to meditate, or I got to have this sacred space. Not to make fun of that concept, but you always think it should be done over here. And what's
Right.
incredible about that book is he says every time you hear a car horn, you should just stop and take it in. Or when you approach a staircase and you go up the stairs, every staircase you see, just stop, clear your mind, and walk up the stairs and breathe. So it's this incredible infusion, I think, of what you're talking about in the way you're relating to the interconnectedness as opposed to an independent, isolated thing bumping into other things.
Yeah.
That
Did he
animals do
say?
that so well.
Yeah. Didn't he say something? Did Thich Nhat Hanh? Didn't he say something like walking as if each step you take, you're kissing the ground?
He may have. He may have. It's
I,
yeah,
he may have said something like that, but there is, for me, that sense of like,
yeah,
what if,
yeah,
what if each step
yeah.
you took was kissing the ground with your foot, right? And actually, in the course that I've been teaching online right now, the magician course, um, I talk about the problem with allowing ourselves to wear rubber soles, right?
Oh,
With shoes and rubber soles, we are immediately disconnected from our ground, from
yeah,
the earth,
yeah,
And so, just taking off your shoes and putting your feet on the ground is a way to literally to ground yourself, to
hmm
be reconnected with that nurturing mother energy. That we are children of earth and sky. I mean, we are.
hmm
So taking off your shoes is a good thing to do sometimes, because
yeah.
rubber so isolating. They separate us.
Yeah, and then you start thinking along the same lines of Thich Nhat Hanh because he is a big proponent of whenever you're doing anything, start thinking of the connections. If you're eating a bowl of rice, where'd the rice come from? Where'd the bowl come from? And you can think about that in an almost nightmarish way about the rubber. With the history of colonialism and what so many things we use it for, and it's so disconnecting, and you can kind of unravel it that way. But
Yeah.
one other thing that really struck me, and maybe it fits into the class you're giving now, or maybe the Cradle and the Crown work that you've done. But I was really struck by the sea of sad stories we're in right now. Almost everyone has some kind of uh, almost overwhelming uncertainty. In my case, I don't
Yeah.
know when I'll see my fiance. For other people, literally health problems if people are sick or maybe even passed away. And it seems like this isn't to minimize your experience that you had there, or say it's something else, but it seems in some weird way this, when you talk about the ayahuasca or experiences, that it's a dismantling or even a dismembering, and it seems like in a slow way we're all being dismembered in that ancient way that you hear the shamans talk about it, or you hear people when they write about their ayahuasca experiences, where they're literally dismembered and put back together. But it happens quickly and it happens in ritual space. And so I'm curious because I was really struck with this notion of the generosity of life in this dismemberment that you talk about. And here we're slowly being dismembered with, and I don't know what you want to do with that, but it does feel like we're in this grand dismemberment to what we're used to in our Camus would say our faith in the near future. That's what he talks about in the Plague. He talks about we were duped by our faith in the near future. So we're in this gradual but total dismemberment. And so I'm curious how that maybe relates to anything you want to say, but particularly with maybe the awakening the magician within. Maybe there's a connection or anywhere you want to go with that. It really struck me.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a really intense question. Because, well, it's mostly because this is not a ritual space in that sense, right?
Right.
Usually when you're going through a dismemberment of some kind, right, a profound letting go, you are held by ritual space, by a shaman, by, all those things. And so in this case, with the pandemic and everything else that's going on, we are collectively going through this dismemberment, right? This uncertainty, this not knowing, this, state of in between and of liminality, all of that. And it truly is has that potential for transformation because it's not knowing. But at the same time, there's a lot of doubt, because there is no great shaman showing us the way. It's not it's not a done deal. It's not. We don't know where we're going to end up, because no one has gone through this exact situation. So anything is possible, right? Good and bad. Anything is possible. So it takes me back to, I think what Carl Jung was talking about, which is that individuation is, how is it going to turn out? It depends. It depends, on how many people are going to be able to go through this individuation process, do their own inner work. If enough people do it, then we have a chance of making it, in a way that then takes us to a whole other stage of the story, of the human story. But it's not a guarantee. I can't give you a guarantee. And that's why, the internal process and the inner work and the willingness of someone to really take in what's happening and deal with it without trying to hang on to, other ways and compulsive or obsessive things to try to deal with the internal anxiety.
Right.
That takes courage and vulnerability and willingness. And from what, I hear around, I think people are getting to this place where they realize they really need to do this work. Like, there's nothing out there that's going to fix it for you at this point. And there is no guaranteed way out or solution at this point. The only guarantee is your own personal connection to that ephemeral, mysterious thing, which is your own connection to psyche, to soul,
Mm-hmm.
and how, finding that way of being in the world where you can find some sense of inner balance and how you do that, and that's why I'm doing that, Awakening the Magician course right now, because it's all about that. You explore the four elements, right, of the magician, right? And through the cup, the coin, the sword, and the wand, you're looking at the four aspects of life and what kind of relationship do you have with your feeling life and your, spirit life, your intellectual life, with the physical material world around you. How connected are you to the elements? You know, to air, to earth, to fire, and so on. So that's the work that can help you find some kind of balance while everything else is out of balance around you. It has to be the inner work. It has to be finding a way to ground yourself by using some of those archetypal tools and the other things I've talked about. Because there is no great leader out there that's going to
Yeah.
show.
And as you wonderfully elucidated, there isn't a container. You think of, I don't know, the great mysteries, right? You had some path that you were going on, some ritual that, or with your experience, the shaman was the container for this experience.
Yeah.
But there's no container. I'm curious about, because you know this material well, and it sounds reductionist, and I apologize to say material, but you had brought up tools. I'm wondering, have you noticed differences in the experience of engaging in this material now, with maybe discussions with students, or the way you're even reading text, the way they're reading back at you now based on your experience in this, because you're probably quote unquote familiar with this material, but it's a very unfamiliar time, and so I'm interesting to see if there's new things or different
Yeah.
avenues that have
I
been talked about or thought about based on this grand dismemberment or this upheaval we're all in your course right now.
Well, I can tell you that I didn't realize how uh, important it was to do this right now. I mean,
Ah,
um, I didn't realize how meaningful and crucial in some cases for people this was. It's like, for some of my students, it feels like it's like, oh, finally getting water when you're really thirsty.
wow.
It's like it's it, it's like a reconnecting with, that inner magician is like, oh, the only power I have is over my own life and how I relate to myself, and putting myself in balance and in a sacred context, so that, because the society doesn't create that for us right now, it's about how do I create that for myself,
Mhm.
and that kind of holding. And so definitely I would say it has an even more profound and meaning right now than it's ever had before, because it feels essential. Like, I need to awake that sense of connection to my inner, uh, magician, to myself, in that way. And how do I balance those aspects of myself? How do I relate to the world coming from a sense of groundedness in any way,
Yeah,
when everything's so,
yeah.
unstable? And so, yeah, it feels really, really essential right
Yeah.
now, in a way that it didn't even occur to me before I started teaching
Yeah,
this.
it seems like you're describing there's such a urgency um, in,
Yeah, almost.
like a nowness, like I have to do this now. That
Yes.
maybe it could have been
Yeah.
to some people, and you even talked about in your journey that you were sensing that you had to do this now, but all of us are, or at least it sounds like a lot of us are reacting that way to this experience that now, and it's not only just the COVID upheaval, but I think it's also illuminated a lot of. You had a great phrase in your talk about the garbage we return to, and you were talking about the cultural degradation and the stories, the distraction, and COVID has been a very amazing to illuminate so much of of the the I'm thinking of the emperor with the emperor who's naked with no clothes, and COVID has helped us realize, wait a minute, there's so many of these things have no clothes and they're garbage, and it's
Yeah.
made us more aware of time, and that connection between this existential threat, this dismemberment, but also this awareness of, you had mentioned modernity. It's almost like a hyper modernity revealing itself to be, more garbage like than maybe we would have seen before. It's a very interesting collision as you think about then your awakening the magician within.
Yeah. 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 Um, it's almost, I feel almost as if like the work I've done myself has been like a preparation
Interesting.
for what we're going through now. So I can just maybe like be, just half a step like ahead of, some of the people that I'm trying to help. Um, but it really feels it's like you're called into like, okay, like we all have garbage, it's not
Right.
just out
It's not
there. we
exactly right.
we have our own internal cleaning to do as
Yeah.
well,
Right.
whether it's with our thinking or how we take care of our bodies, all of that. So it's like, okay, am I going to like just let myself go down, that way with, everything else that's happening, or am I going to do my own work
Yeah.
and stay the course so that I can be present, as a teacher and have actually something real to be able to give
Hmm.
other people.
Hmm.
And that's really important to me. I have to come from. I can't just say words if I haven't had the experience of it. I can't
Yeah.
speak from inauthentic place. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I get sick if I do that. You know, just get sick, get sick. So, and and it's interesting because, and I think that was part of my journey. Like I was very, very sick for like about a year and a half up until recently.
Mm.
So I think that illness as well was part of my um, like really slowing down process and
Yeah.
cleansing process
Yeah.
for myself as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it takes whatever it takes. Sometimes I can be a little stubborn and I need a little push, and that was one of the gifts that I received was to get really, really sick.
Yeah.
Uh, and to literally, you spoke earlier about you getting very sick and you
Hmm.
thought you were dying and so on. I got to that same place where nothing was working and I couldn't eat, I couldn't do anything. Nothing was working. So it gets very, very serious very quickly when you get to that place of like, okay, what is essential? What is important? What am I doing here? What do I need to hear? What do I need to listen to? And it is, another form of dismemberment. And life will bring
Yeah.
you those blessings whether you want them or not. And it's like, it's about keeping current with yourself and what's really going on, and make sure that you keep doing removing the garbage so you don't get all plugged up, right?
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if you had the same experience. You were referring to a conversation we had, right before we went to record, and I was talking about a severe illness where I was, lucky to survive, but also it involved about 18 months of a kind of painful recovery, physically, and what was very interesting thinking about that now, and as I did realize when I was safe, I got to understand it as a dismemberment and a re-examination, and these gifts started to appear. But what was fascinating about that compared to now is at that time, you know, friends had stable lives, right? Right? Everything else seemed to be stable except like me, right? I mean, they were going
Right.
through difficult things, but what's very interesting now is for the most of us, and unfortunately we've lost so many fellow citizens and many people are sick, but for the billions around the world who are on lockdown, they were the same, but their lives all of a sudden became completely upheaval, which is almost the reverse of that internal illness as wisdom journey I had, or that I guess I went through the underworld. I
Right.
definitely did. I had that underworld journey, and you emerge differently. But it's so hard to think about today because it's like the underworld's all around us, and it's very very interesting when you think about the archetypes involved and the journey.
That, that reminds me of Carl Jung again. I'm going to paraphrase, but if you don't deal with what's happening in the inner world, in the unconscious, it appears outside of
Yeah,
space.
yeah,
I think all the garbage we've internalized, is now appearing outside of space,
yeah,
on a larger scale than
yeah,
ever had before, because it needs to,
yeah,
because it has to.
yeah,
It's it's what needs to happen on a certain level
yeah.
for us, for more of us to wake up to the nature of our world and what our responsibility truly is to this world.
Yeah, yeah. I like that you brought up that notion of, projection. We're seeing the kind of garbage, and I was thinking earlier of, we're becoming more clear about the false gods, and
Mm.
also the. I guess I'm not far from, historically. I mean, geographically, I'm not far from ancient Athens right now, or Athens, and I was thinking of we've never, at this time, I don't think we've ever been more aware of the flames on the wall, that they are just the shadows on the wall. I mean, the shadows on the wall from the flames, and they're not the light. And I think
Yeah,
these false gods or these shadows are more visible now, to kind of give a more
absolutely.
inspiring read about this sea of sad stories. A lot of stuff we hadn't thought about. I know me personally, but everyone is re-examining things that, whether it's ideologies or consumerism or just how you spend your time, it's all being unmasked as shadows on the wall, and not the illuminating sun. So
Yeah,
it's an
yeah.
interesting opportunity.
It certainly is. It certainly is, and
Yeah.
it's not easy. I mean, several members of my family, Canada and Europe, have all been sick, got
Oh,
COVID. So
oh, I'm sorry
a
to hear
very
that.
personal experience for me as well in that way.
Wow.
And and it's very real. And for many people, it's very very real. But it's also, you know, we've been given this huge opportunity on a massive scale
Yeah.
to, re-examine what is our life about? What is it made of? Why are we here? All those questions that we don't often ask when we're busy, caught up in the day-to-dayness of our lives.
Yeah. And it makes me think of your work with tarot that's extended. I mean, you've been teaching it 15 years, so your relationship with tarot practice and your study has been probably much longer. And you talk about tarot as walking this sacred path. So
Yeah.
has your relationship to that been enhanced or revealed new understanding in this time, or do you see it even, I don't know, more necessary, or when you're thinking about it as a symbol system reflective of our journey to self and wholeness, as
Uh,
Jung would say?
I think, everybody goes through those difficulties in our life's journey. And what the Tarot shows is that they are both, they're a call, they're a call of the mystery to really examine our lives. And we all go through experiences with the hangman, the tower, judgment, all of things. They come from all of us, and they come in cycles. And usually, unless we are aware of the need for transformation and change, life will provide those opportunities for us, whether we like them or not,
Mm-hmm.
unless we do our own inner work, proactively. And most people tend to be resistant to change. It's like kind of human nature. So life will provide those experiences for us, those hangman experience where everything is turned upside down and you're just stuck having to be in, not able to do anything, but just be in this,
Yeah.
place until you understand that unless you accept what is, you can't change it. Right. And then with the tower, my God, we've been,
Yeah.
falling
Right.
out of the tower and being struck
Yeah.
by divine,
Yeah.
divine stroke. But it is life trying to completely break us out of our ego position.
Yeah.
So it is a gift. It just, you know, is not often experienced that way because it often comes through illness or accidents or
Yeah.
things that are really intense because it's the only way we're going to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can't help but thinking you have me with your class about awakening the magician within. We all have to answer the door when the wizard comes knocking, as Frodo and Bilbo experienced, and
Yes.
have to leave the Shire. And I think Hanged Man and the Tower are pretty interesting cards to meditate on right
Yeah.
now. Right now.
Certainly, right. Yeah, certainly. But there is always, that's what's so amazing about the tarot is that they contain both light and
Yes.
shadow.
Yes.
Right? So the problem and the solution are all in the same card, in the same archetype, in the same alchemical archetype. So that's the gift because we live in duality so much that it's hard for us to conceive of a system that contains the opposites the way the archetypes do, the tarot does. But that's part of what I love about it because it's never only one side or another. You have to consider both.
Mm-hmm.
You have to hold both. Just like with the very first card of the tarot is not the magician, it's the fool, it's the zero, right? Because the zero is that incredible symbol that contains both emptiness and infinite possibility, right? That's why it's such a sacred, number, that transcends things. So we are surrounded, that's the good news is that the world is so much greater than our thinking of duality and how we live in duality.
Mm-hmm.
It does contain wholeness through the opposites. It does contain both light and shadow. And if we can stay connected to that idea, I think it can help us process some of those really difficult times where we feel like it's only shadow, you know.
Yeah, and the other great gift, just listening to you now when you're talking about the ego art, you could think of control and that illusion of our control is really fear. And the great gift we're experiencing now, you just mentioned that love, you can't have love without vulnerability. And we're all experiencing vulnerability in these meta
Yeah.
ways. Not just, oh, I may get hurt in a relationship, but, we don't know how long it's going to go on, when we're going to see people. It's this meta sense of vulnerability, which I think makes it so dismembering, but
Yeah.
also so
It's
beautiful.
yes.
Yeah, as an
Yeah.
opportunity. And
Yeah.
especially as a man, a Western man, raised on stories of individualism and control and be strong, all those things. We all have these narratives, and everything's being stripped away, and that's a great opportunity. That's how I felt personally when I got very sick, and when you feel physically vulnerable. But now we
Oh
may
yeah.
we may feel normal, but our lives are not. Life isn't normal, and all of a sudden we realize everything is can be quote unquote taken away, like in a wasteland sort of sense, and that having to embrace and even admit that vulnerability, I think, is difficult, but that's the
Yeah.
opportunity.
And then you have what also surrounds, like in living in California. Then you have the fires and the
Yes.
earthquakes. It's just
Yeah.
you know even the ground you stand on is not stable.
Right.
And I like back in 2017, I experienced the Thomas fire, and I was in
Oh,
Ojai and
wow.
had to be evacuated and all that. So there's definitely you know the outer world is not about safety and
Mm,
balance and all of these things that we like to have in our lives. There's very little that we can actually control, and
yeah. Yeah.
that's where I think going to those uh, archetypes and that hold both energies, light and shadow, is really helpful. And doing that inner work, obviously.
Well, what's really helpful for me is hearing that you were working on one novel, but now I think you've started another. So I think
Yes.
all of us are in some. Many of us are finding it difficult to be creative, or we're in this kind of stupor. So personally, I'm very inspired that you have put one project aside but started a new one. And I don't, obviously you don't have to tell us about the novel, but I'm curious if it's come out of recent experiences like this, or maybe it was a personal thing that you had, maybe with the horse or moving to Ojai. I'm curious about just where it came from. And I admire that you've been creative in this time. It's difficult when everything's upside down, like it's like a hanged world, as
Yes.
opposed to the hanged man. Yeah.
Upside down. Yes. Yes. The whole world is. Yeah. Definitely, this new novel is absolutely and completely inspired by what I've been going through, and I'm someone who really, like I said before, listen to my dreams, and sometimes I have in daily life experiences that have that same aura of the dream, like I spoke about before. So I would say that this new novel really brings into focus the juxtaposition between trauma and traumatic events in life as we've been experiencing, and um, the magic and the mystery of life, like right next to each other, and how to hold those both, and how they get expressed in our life. And so that's the real focus of what I've been doing, and and I often sign my emails with the phrase in service of a handmade life. And that's probably, a handmade life is probably going to be the title of my new novel.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. It makes me think that, Raina, there's so much I want to talk about. We haven't got to the Handless Maiden, and I wanted to talk about Sir Gawain, and we can't get to that,
Oh, yeah.
unfortunately. But hopefully, we'll be able to catch up with you again. And I just want to thank you
Absolutely.
for all your time tonight, but also everything you do for the Philosophical Research Society. Sounds like an incredible course you're doing now, and I hope people will kind of follow the PRS.org website and be aware of new ones that are coming up. I know you do a lot of work for us, and What's the best way for people to just keep in touch with what's going on with you? Is it RaïnaParis.com, I believe?
It's
Okay. Okay.
RaïnaMParis.com.
Good. Well,
Yeah.
I'm sure Dr. Salyer or whoever's we'll put it in the link below so people can connect with you. I found it's just beautiful. You're such a beautiful writer, and I really encourage people to watch some of the videos on the playlist, especially. It wasn't my first time. I listened to it again recently. The love and sacred medicine talk, and that you gave it on Valentine's, and I have a personal connection to that because I was in that liminal space of jet lag. I didn't know where I was, and if you don't mind, if you don't mind, if it's not embarrassing to you and I don't butcher it, I thought I would close with a quote and maybe have you reflect on it a little for us now, if that's okay, from that talk.
Okay.
Okay, so you talk about love. You're talking about love in the talk. I don't want to give away the ending, so people will have to find out where it comes up. But this is the your words, your beautiful words. Love, the unvarnished glory of true being, is almost unbearable to my human, limited self. Milan Kundera, the Czech-born writer, named it the unbearable lightness of being. It is the story of the universe, the gift of the shaman's song. The songs are real. They are a portal to wholeness. Their power is real when the heart is open and receptive to it. But to let it in is almost too much. It's a lot to think about for me when I heard that.
Thank you for reading that back to me, actually. It's powerful to hear it. I haven't read or heard those words in quite a long time.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up, because we've been talking about vulnerability and control and love and using these tools that you're, whether it's tarot or the workshops or meditation or the work with the archetypes, and you find them in literature, and language itself can be a tool now. And I was really struck. That's why I wanted to read that, because the language itself as a mantra or as a gateway, um, moving out of the quote unquote daily life to a kind of mythical time or a ceremonial time, that we have to be very aware of the language we use, because it is the gateway to how we kind of relate. Yeah.
Yeah, words are.
Yeah, and as we see in our American election race, language is being degraded a lot. as you and with Twitter and all these things, it seems like there's a war on this kind of language you use, the language of
Yeah,
love that is expressed in songs.
yeah, and it's the opposite of vulnerability, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's judgment. It's definitions. It's finalizations. It's insults. It's simplifications. Yeah.
And armament against the other.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I wonder what Martin Buber would come up with. I don't know if he wouldn't. I don't know if he, what's I anti thou. I am. Yeah, I don't know what he would use in terms of this toxicity. And I guess that's my last talk. If you have any, I mean, last question is, if you had any uh, thoughts you want to share about dealing with some of the toxicity. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about COVID, but there's a lot of toxicity. Maybe it's the same as it's ever been, but there does seem to be a hyper kind of toxicity, a kind of things in the world trying to permeate us and bring us into this
Yeah,
distraction, with whether it's the mechanisms of social media or the hyper ideological or partisanship or the othering that we're seeing, or conspiracy theories, insults, the Russians, the Chinese. It's all this toxicity. And so I'm curious what your thoughts were about that, as someone who has helped people walk the sacred path and it's a weird time.
Yeah. Um, well, there's been a huge emphasis in cultivating um, hatred and disconnection, but I think that people can. I think they want to remember their humanity. I think there is such a deep longing for connection and for relatedness, right? There's such a deep
Yes.
longing for relatedness right now. And I think if people can just stop and take a step back, they will know, they will remember what they're really deeply longing for. And that what they want is this relatedness that comes from a vulnerable heart, as opposed to guarding against the other and refusing to acknowledge any truth in someone else. I think you know, I kind of wrote an open letter to Mr. Trump the other day just for myself,
Mm-hmm.
and it was exactly about that. It was just saying, you can call the Americans and cultivate hatred in them, but I think there is goodness in every one of us, and that goodness is the goodness that remembers itself from the child that we were and from the desire that we have to be in relationship with other human beings. And hatred will only get us so far,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
love will take us further. And there is that deep heart hunger
Yeah.
for relatedness and connection right now. And I think people are tired, so tired of hating each
Yeah.
other, of resenting the other, of fighting against the other.
Yeah. 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 Well, that's though I don't want to, even if it's late in Izmir, that's a perfect place to end. But end for now. I hope it's just the beginning of another longer conversation. I want to wish you luck on your novel
Thank
and a continued success with the participation in the class. It's I mean, we awaken the magician within is certainly a calling as Gandalf comes knocking on the door, so to speak.
Yeah.
And sometime we'll talk a little bit more about your horse. It sounds like a fascinating relationship, and it sounds like you found an amazing teacher. And
Yes.
I just want to remind everyone that they can subscribe to PRS YouTube channel if you haven't already. That really helps us. And you can visit prs.org and support in signing up for events and classes like courses like we talked about, Awakening the Magician Within. And there's an expanded a store with a lot of offerings now. And thank you so much, Dr. Raïna Manuel-Paris, for your time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we look forward to the next one.